In this video, I will show you how to extract the caffeine from caffeine tablets. Just a quick disclaimer, this may not work on all caffeine tablets. To extract the caffeine, you're only going to need two ingredients, liquid DMSO and caffeine tablets. The first step is to crush the caffeine tablets into a fine powder. The finer this powder is, the better the process will go. The most efficient way to crush the tablets would be to use a coffee grinder or a mortar, but since I don't have either of those, I just use a pair of pliers to crush them and to grind them up. Once the tablets are grinded into a nice powder, I then poured it into an Erlenmeyer flask. I don't suggest using a regular beaker because the Erlenmeyer flask will reduce the amount of evaporating DMSO when the solution is heated up. I still had some powder left in the container that I used for crushing the tablets, so I poured some DMSO into it to gather the powder. Then I poured the DMSO from the tablet crushing container and the rest of the DMSO I had left in the bottle into the Erlenmeyer flask to start dissolving the caffeine. Next, I warmed up the solution to allow the caffeine to dissolve into the DMSO quicker. I made sure to swirl the solution as often as I could to make the dissolving process faster. After about 10 minutes of mixing, I took it off the heat and I let the solution sit for a while so the solids would settle to the bottom. After that, I poured the liquid into a round bottom beaker, making sure I didn't pour any of the solids that were at the bottom of the flask into it. I hooked up the round bottom beaker to my distiller and turned on the heat. The only reason I used a distiller instead of just boiling off is to restore some of the DMSO we used to dissolve the caffeine in. Once most of the liquid in the round bottom beaker had been evaporated, I poured it out and boiled the rest off. Make sure you don't overheat this solution because it is flammable and it can randomly burst into flames if you overheat it. This almost happened to me. What I have made here is a supersaturated solution. While a solvent is hot, it allows more solute to be dissolved into it. Once a solvent is cooled, it has that solute dissolved into it and is very unstable. If you bump it or place something inside of the solvent, the solute will come out of the solution as seen here. Most of the contents in this beaker are caffeine, but there are also some impurities from the starting powder. All I had to do now was evaporate the rest of the liquid off, so I used a hairdryer to somewhat dry the caffeine. Once I could see caffeine fibers that could stick together, I decided it was time to move it to a larger plate. Once it was dry enough, I transferred it to a plate to speed up the evaporation process. I placed the hairdryer next to the plate to dry it out until it was left with some dry fibers. The reason I placed it on the plate was so that I'd had more of the caffeine touching the air. Once I had dry caffeine fibers, I piled up the dry caffeine and put it in a bottle for storage. Although we've gone through a long process, this caffeine is still not pure, but I think it's good enough for now. In a future video, I plan to recrystallize and clean this caffeine so it becomes a very pure powder. If you like these videos, please consider subscribing and helping me out.